Good day, all. It's Vivvy here. Welcome back and cuddle up. Let's dive in right away. Today, we share some pain and joy. But before, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiration. Let us allow our sister to talk us through this one. She's been aching to share her story and how she made it through.
I spent 3 months saving for a dress to wear to my son's wedding. But when I finally arrived, breathless and late, I heard my daughter-in-law's voice from behind a bougainvillea tree. Thank goodness she missed the whole ceremony. And just like that, everything I thought I knew about my place in my son's life shattered. Come sit down with me. Pour yourself some tea. Get comfortable in that favorite chair. Today's story is one that still makes my heart ache a little, even though it taught me one of life's most important lessons. It's about a mother who discovered she'd become invisible in her own son's life. About the moment you realize the people you've sacrificed everything for would rather you weren't there at all. But before we begin, I want you to know something. If you've ever felt like you don't quite fit into your own family anymore, like you're being tolerated rather than celebrated, you're not alone. We all walk these roads, my dear. And sometimes the most painful moments are the ones that set us free. So, let me tell you about the wedding day that changed my entire life. At 67 years old, after 4 decades working as a seamstress out of my house in Southside Atlanta, I never thought I'd be scraping together money to buy a dress for my own son's wedding. But there I was. My name is Grace Pyral, and for those 40 years, I've been sewing other people's dreams. Hemming wedding dresses for brides I'd never meet. Altering suits for businessmen rushing to important meetings. Mending children's clothes for mothers who brought them in with apologetic smiles and tight budgets. A seamstress, my mama used to say, holds the threads of 1,000 lives in her hands. I never thought much about it until my son Ethan announced he was getting married to Tasha, a girl from Buckhead, the fancy part of Atlanta where the houses have names instead of just numbers, and the driveways are longer than my entire street. The moment Ethan told me about the engagement, I started planning. Not the wedding. Lord knows Tasha and her mother had that under control from day one. No, I was planning what I would wear. How I would present myself. How I would make sure my son felt proud to introduce me to all those Buckhead people. I've lived alone for 15 years now, ever since my husband Curtis passed away in a work accident. We were barely 35 when it happened. One Tuesday morning he kissed me goodbye and went to work at the construction site. By noon, I was a widow with a young son and a future that suddenly looked nothing like what I'd planned. You know, they don't prepare you for that. For the moment your whole life splits into before and after. Before Curtis died, I was a wife who sewed a little on the side. After, I became the woman who raised a boy alone, whose hands were always busy with needle and thread because sitting still meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering, and remembering hurt too much. But I did it. I raised Ethan by myself. Good schools. I made sure of that even when it meant working double shifts. Nice clothes. Always, because I knew how kids could be cruel about appearances. Every opportunity one could give him, I gave him. And he turned out beautifully, my Ethan. Smart as a whip. Charming. The kind of young man who could talk to anyone and make them feel like they were the most interesting person in the room. He got himself through college, landed a good job at a tech company downtown, and worked his way up until he was wearing those expensive suits and driving that sleek car. I was so proud. And then he met Tasha. Now don't get me wrong. Tasha is a beautiful girl. Educated. Polished. The kind of woman who always knows the right thing to say and wear and do. She came from money. Her daddy owns some kind of consulting firm and her mother is on about 17 different charity boards. The first time Ethan brought her to meet me, I'd cleaned my little Southside house until it sparkled. I'd cooked all afternoon. Fried chicken, collard greens, mac and cheese, cornbread. All of Ethan's favorites. Tasha arrived in a white pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. She picked at the chicken, trying to watch my figure, and kept checking her phone. When I offered her seconds, she laughed this little laugh and said, "Oh, Mother Pyral, this is lovely, but I really couldn't." So much richness. The way she said that word. Richness. Like it was code for something else. Ethan didn't notice. Or maybe he did and chose not to see it. He just smiled and ate 3 helpings and told me it was the best meal he'd had in months. After they left, I found myself standing in my kitchen, looking at all that food I'd spent hours preparing, most of it barely touched. And for the first time I felt something I'd never felt in my own home. Small. But I pushed that feeling aside. Tasha was nervous, I told myself. Meeting your boyfriend's mother is stressful. She'd warm up to me eventually. Except she never really did. Over the next 2 years of their courtship, I saw Tasha exactly 7 times. Always brief visits. Always with Ethan as a buffer. She'd kiss my cheek. Air kisses, the kind that don't actually touch your skin, and ask polite questions about my work. Still sewing, Mother Pyral? I'd say. Still sewing. Don't you ever think about retiring? Ethan's doing so well now. I'm sure he'd help you out. The implication was clear. Women my age shouldn't still be working. Wasn't dignified. Not for the mother of a successful young professional. But I didn't want to retire. I liked working. It gave me purpose. Kept my hands busy and my mind sharp. And besides, I'd been supporting myself since I was 17 years old. I wasn't about to start depending on my son now. Independence, I've always believed, is the greatest gift you can give yourself. Though sometimes I'm learning independence can look a lot like loneliness. When Ethan and Tasha got engaged, a proposal at some fancy restaurant I'd never heard of, with a ring that cost more than I'd earned in 6 months, I knew I needed to prepare. Not just emotionally. Practically. I needed a dress. A good dress. The kind of dress that would let me stand next to Tasha's mother Brenda without looking like somebody's poor relation. So I started saving. $5 here. $10 there. Every time I finished a sewing job, I'd take a little bit and tuck it away in an envelope I kept in my underwear drawer. The envelope had Ethan's wedding written on it in my careful handwriting. It took me 3 months to save up enough. 3 months of saying no to things I wanted. No to the new cushions for my rocking chair. No to the fancy coffee I liked from the shop on the corner. No to contributing to the church fundraiser, even though it made me feel guilty. Every penny went into that envelope. Finally, I had enough. $247. Doesn't sound like much, I know. To Tasha's family, that was probably what they spent on a single dinner out. But to me, it represented 12 weeks of careful discipline. Of choosing my son's wedding over my own small comforts. I went to Macy's on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd never shopped at Macy's before, too expensive for my usual budget. But this was special. The dress I found was navy blue. Simple, elegant, with a modest neckline and 3/4 sleeves. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would draw too much attention. But when I put it on in that fitting room and looked at myself in the mirror, I felt presentable. Not beautiful. I'd stopped thinking of myself as beautiful years ago after Curtis died and the lines around my eyes deepened and my hair started going gray. But presentable. Appropriate. Like someone who belonged at a Buckhead wedding. The dress cost $212. I had enough left over for a small alteration and a pair of low heels that wouldn't kill my feet. I brought it home like it was made of gold. I hung it in my closet where I could see it every morning. Sometimes I'd run my hand over the fabric, feeling its quality. This wasn't like the clothes I usually wore. The practical things from Target or the thrift store. The pieces that were chosen for durability rather than beauty. This was a dress for a special occasion. A dress that said, I am the mother of the groom and I belong here. I'll tell you something funny, though I didn't think it was funny at the time. A week before the wedding, Tasha called me. Mother Pyral, she said in that bright voice she used when she wanted something. I wanted to check in about your outfit for the wedding. Oh, I've got that all sorted out, I told her proudly. I bought a lovely navy blue dress. Very elegant. There was a pause. Just a beat too long. Navy blue, she repeated. Well, that's fine. I just want to make sure you're comfortable. You know the wedding is quite formal. I know, sweetheart. That's why I got something nice. Another pause. And you have someone to do your hair? Maybe some makeup? I can give you the name of my mother's salon if you want. They're very good with mature clients. Mature clients. There it was again. That careful language that really meant old ladies who need help not looking embarrassing. I'll manage just fine, Tasha. But thank you. After we hung up, I stood there holding the phone, feeling that same small feeling creeping back in. Like no matter what I did, it wouldn't be quite right. I'd be too old, too plain, too Southside Atlanta at a Buckhead wedding. But I pushed it away. This was my son's wedding. My only child. The boy I'd raised alone, sacrificed for, poured my whole heart into. I had every right to be there looking my best, proud as any mother. I had every right. Didn't I? I woke up before sunrise on the wedding day, just like I'd done every day since Curtis died. Some habits are too deep to break. But this morning was different. This morning, Every movement was careful, deliberate. I'd planned it all out like a military operation. 6 a.m. Wake up, shower, wash my hair. 7 a.m. Set my hair in the rollers I'd bought specially for this occasion. 8 a.m. Light breakfast, couldn't have my stomach growling during the ceremony. 9 a.m. Start on my makeup, taking my time to get it right. 10 a.m. Get dressed carefully, making sure every button was fastened, every seam straight. 11 a.m. Final check in the mirror, then leave for the First Metropolitan Baptist Church downtown. The ceremony was at noon. I'd given myself a full hour to get there, even though it usually only took 35 minutes. I wanted to arrive early. To find a good seat. To be there when Ethan arrived so I could give him a hug before everything got too hectic. I'd prepared his wedding gift the night before. A complete set of hand-embroidered sheets that had taken me 2 months to finish. Every evening after completing my sewing orders, I'd sit in my good chair with my embroidery hoop, stitching their initials in elegant script, surrounded by tiny flowers. White on white, delicate and beautiful. The work of your hands, my mama used to say, carries your love in every stitch. Those sheets represented 60 nights of labor. 60 nights of careful stitching, of eye strain and cramped fingers, of pouring my love into something tangible that they could use in their new life together. I'd wrapped them in silver paper with a white ribbon. They sat on my kitchen table ready to go. At 10:45 I stood in front of my bathroom mirror for the final check. The dress fit perfectly. My hair, released from the rollers, fell in soft waves around my face. I'd even managed to get my makeup on without smudging. A light touch of foundation, some powder, a modest lipstick. I looked at myself in that mirror, really looked, and for the first time in years I felt almost pretty. Not like those Buckhead ladies with their professional styling and expensive jewelry. But like a woman who'd made an effort. A mother who was proud to attend her son's wedding. I picked up my mother's pearl earrings, the only piece of jewelry I'd inherited when she passed, and put them on carefully. They were genuine pearls, cream-colored and lustrous. The most valuable thing I owned. "Well, Mama," I said to her memory, "I think you'd be proud of Ethan today." I grabbed the gift, my small purse, and headed for the door. It was 11:05 when I left my house. Plenty of time. Plenty. Except there wasn't. I'd barely made it 3 blocks when I saw it. The water main break on Clover Lane had turned the main avenue into a river. Firefighters had blocked off 3 entire city blocks. Cones everywhere. Detour signs pointing in directions I'd never gone. My neighbor Delia was standing on her porch, arms crossed, shaking her head. "Grace," she yelled. "You can't get out this way. It's been closed since 5 this morning." "But I have to get downtown," I called back. "My son's wedding. You'll have to walk around to Jefferson Street, see if you can catch a taxi there. Ain't no way through here, honey." 15 blocks. 15 blocks in my new low heels, in my beautiful navy dress, carrying my son's wedding gift. I wanted to cry. But crying would ruin my makeup and I'd worked too hard on it. So I walked. Let me tell you something, my dear. There's a particular kind of humiliation that comes from walking through your neighborhood in your best clothes while everyone else is in their regular Saturday morning attire. People doing yard work. Kids playing basketball. Teenagers on porches looking at their phones. All of them stopping to watch the old lady in the navy dress, wobbling on her heels, clearly going somewhere important and clearly not going to make it on time. "You okay, Miss Grace?" called out Jerome from 2 streets over. "Fine, baby. Just fine," I lied, even though my feet were already starting to blister. By the time I made it to Jefferson Street, my hair was starting to fall, my makeup was melting in the October heat, and my feet were screaming. I finally flagged down a taxi. The driver, a young man named Marcus, took one look at me and asked, "Rough morning?" "Wedding," I said, breathless. "My son's wedding. The First Metropolitan Baptist." He glanced at the clock on his dashboard. 11:47. "I'll do my best," he said kindly. "But with these detours." We didn't make it. We pulled up to First Metropolitan Baptist at 12:23. 23 minutes late. The ceremony had started at noon sharp. I could hear the organ music from inside. They were already in the middle of the service. I paid Marcus, added a generous tip because he'd driven like a man on a mission, and got out of the taxi on legs that barely wanted to hold me anymore. My beautiful dress was wrinkled from sitting. My hair had collapsed on one side. My makeup had smudged under my eyes from the heat and the stress. All that preparation. All that money. All that time. And I'd missed it. I'd missed my own son's wedding ceremony. I stood there in the parking lot for a full minute trying to compose myself. Trying to decide what to do. I could go in late, slip into the back, catch the end of the ceremony. But the thought of all those Buckhead people turning to look at me, late, disheveled, the poor mother from Southside who couldn't even make it on time to her own son's wedding, that thought made me want to disappear into the ground. Oh. I'd wait. I'd fix myself up as best I could and I'd go to the reception. I'd congratulate Ethan and Tasha. I'd give them my gift. I'd smile and be gracious and no one would know how much this hurt. I walked around to the back of the church, looking for a bathroom where I could freshen up before entering the reception hall. That's when I heard it. That's when my whole world cracked open. The back of First Metropolitan Baptist has a small garden area. It's meant for bridesmaids to rest between photos, for guests who need air during long ceremonies, for moments of quiet before the celebration begins. There are benches, rose bushes, and a large, beautiful bougainvillea tree with cascading purple flowers. I was heading toward the bathroom entrance when I heard voices. Female voices. Laughing. I should have kept walking. I should have minded my business. But I heard my name. Grace showing up now. I stopped. My feet literally stopped moving like my body knew before my brain did that I needed to hear what came next. I moved closer to the bougainvillea tree, hidden by its flowering branches, and listened. The voice was Tasha's. I'd know it anywhere. Thank goodness she missed the whole ceremony, Tasha was saying. You know how she is, always with her sad stories, always talking about how hard it was raising Ethan alone, always reminding everyone she doesn't have money. It's better that she only showed up now. Another voice laughed. Kendra, one of Tasha's bridesmaids. Oh, mothers-in-law are like that. Always playing the victim. My mom says it's typical of those older ladies who have nothing else to do but stick their noses in their kids' lives. A third voice. Candace, another bridesmaid. Plus, can you imagine if she had shown up in that old outfit? You can tell she doesn't know how to dress for elegant occasions. It's better this way, right? No poor mother-in-law drama. They laughed. All three of them. Light, tinkling laughter like they were discussing something mildly amusing rather than completely destroying someone. Me. They were destroying me. I stood there behind that bougainvillea tree and I felt something inside my chest that I can only describe as freezing. Like ice water was running through my veins, turning everything cold and hard. Old outfit. That dress had cost me 3 months of savings. Sad stories. I only talked about raising Ethan when they asked, trying to be honest without being pitiful. Poor mother-in-law drama. For 2 years I'd quietly helped Ethan and Tasha financially. Small amounts here and there. $50 for a new refrigerator they wanted, $100 for their engagement party deposit, money for gas, for groceries, for a dozen little things that Ethan would mention in passing and I would provide because that's what mothers do. I kept track. Not because I expected it back, but because I'm a woman who's been careful with money her whole life. $8,000, give or take. That's what I'd given them over 2 years. $8,000 of my pension, my sewing money, my careful savings. And this is what they thought of me. I should have confronted them right then. Stepped out from behind that tree and demanded an explanation. Let them see my face, let them know I'd heard everything. But I didn't. You know why? Because I was wearing my mother's pearl earrings and I'd promised myself I wouldn't cry at this wedding. Crying would have been the ultimate poor mother-in-law drama. So instead I did something remarkable. I took a deep breath. I smoothed down my wrinkled navy dress. I checked my makeup in my compact mirror and fixed what I could. I put on the smile I'd worn through 40 years of being a widow, of raising a child alone, of making do with less. And I walked into that reception hall through the main entrance like I'd planned to arrive exactly at that moment. Grace. Thank heavens you made it. Ethan's voice cut through the reception hall noise. He came running toward me, well, as much running as you can do in a fancy tuxedo, and wrapped me in a hug. My son. My beautiful son. In his wedding suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, smelling like expensive cologne, looking like he belonged in a magazine. Mom, I thought something terrible had happened to you. I hugged him back, breathing in that expensive cologne, feeling the fine fabric of his suit against my cheek. A pipe burst on my street, son, I said, my voice remarkably steady. but I wasn't going to miss your wedding for anything in the world. Tasha appeared at his elbow, beautiful in her wedding dress that probably cost what I made in a year. Her smile was perfect. Practiced. Mother Pyral, what a shame you missed the ceremony. It was so beautiful. I kissed her on the cheek. The same air kiss she'd always given me. The important thing is that you're married now, I said. God bless you both. And then I did something I'd never done before in my life. I studied them. Really studied them. Not as my son and his wife, but as two people who had just revealed themselves to me in ways they didn't know. I watched Ethan throughout that reception with new eyes. Eyes that weren't clouded by maternal love and pride. I saw how he introduced me to his coworkers. This is my mom. Casual. Neutral. Not, this is my mother who worked 2 jobs to put me through school. Or, this is my mother who never missed a single parent-teacher conference. Just, this is my mom. I saw how he moved through that crowd of buckhead people, laughing at jokes I didn't understand, using words I didn't recognize, existing in a world that had nothing to do with the small Southside house where he grew up. And I saw my sister-in-law Simone, Ethan's aunt on his father's side. She's always been a bit cold, but today she was glacial. When she introduced me to some guest, she said, "This is Ethan's mom, Grace. She works from home. Not she's a seamstress. Not she's an artist with fabric. Just works from home," like it was something vaguely embarrassing. When other guests asked about my work, genuinely interested questions from kind people, Simone would change the subject. "Oh, let's not talk about work at a wedding. Tell me about your trip to Italy." My nephew Devon, Simone's son, barely looked at me. A quick kiss on the cheek, then gone. My nieces, Chloe and Skylar, who used to follow me around at family gatherings asking me to teach them how to embroider. They smiled politely and found reasons to drift away within minutes. It was like I'd been marked with an invisible stamp. Not one of us. But the worst moment came when they opened the gifts. I'd positioned myself where I could watch. Where I could see their faces when they opened my hand-embroidered sheets. Gift after gift was opened with genuine enthusiasm. Designer cookware from Tasha's parents. A luxury honeymoon package from her bridesmaids. A set of crystal glasses from Ethan's co-workers. Each one met with squeals of delight, prolonged thank yous, photographs taken. Then Ethan opened my gift. He lifted the sheets. White on white, months of work, thousands of tiny stitches forming their initials, surrounded by delicate flowers. "Oh," he said. Just, "Oh." Tasha took them from him, glanced at them quickly and said, "Thanks, Mother Pyral." Then she put them down. Not on the gift table where everyone could see them. Under the table. Beneath it. Out of sight. Those sheets that represented 60 nights of labor, that carried my love in every stitch, were treated like something inconvenient to be dealt with later. Or never. That's when I understood something profound. Those words I'd heard behind the bougainvillea tree, they weren't just cruel comments from a nervous bride. They were the truth. That's how they saw me. How they'd always seen me. As someone inconvenient. Outdated. Out of place in their prosperous modern lives. A relic from Ethan's past that they preferred to keep on the sidelines of his new married life. I sat at my assigned table. Not the family table with Ethan and Tasha and the wedding party, but a side table with distant relatives of Tasha's whom I'd never met before. They were polite. Aloof. We had nothing in common except our tenuous connection to the bride. From my seat I could see the main table. Ethan and Tasha, surrounded by their friends. All young professionals, dressed in expensive clothes, talking about topics I could barely follow. Investments. International trips. Exclusive restaurants. A world I didn't belong to. The dancing started with music I didn't recognize. The younger guests took over the floor while the older ones remained at their tables, chatting. I waited all night for Ethan to come ask me to dance. He always did at family parties. Ever since he was 8 years old, and I taught him how to two-step in our kitchen. It was our thing. But he never came. He was absorbed in his new wife, his new life, his new world. At 11 o'clock, when the party was still going strong but I could feel myself fading like old fabric left too long in the sun, I decided to leave. I found Ethan near the bar laughing with his groomsmen. "Son, I'm heading out now. I have to work early tomorrow." He gave me a distracted hug. "Already leaving, Mom? Have a good night. Thanks for coming." Thanks for coming. Like I was a casual guest, Not the woman who'd given birth to him, raised him, sacrificed everything for him. Tasha appeared, gave me that automatic air kiss. Thanks for coming, Mother Pyrrol. See you soon. But in her eyes, I saw something that confirmed everything I'd feared. Relief. She was relieved I was leaving. Relieved that her perfect party could continue without the awkward presence of the humble mother-in-law who didn't fit into their new prosperous life. The taxi ride home was 40 minutes through the late-night Atlanta streets. 40 minutes of silence except for the occasional crackle of the driver's radio. 40 minutes of watching the city lights blur past the window while my mind replayed every moment of that day in excruciating detail. The water main break. The long walk. Arriving late. The voices behind the bougainvillea tree. The dismissive introduction. The ignored gift. The forgotten dance. The relieved goodbye. Each memory was like a thread being pulled, and with each thread something inside me was unraveling. When I finally got home, my small Southside house that suddenly felt more lonely than ever, I did something I hadn't done since Curtis died. I sat in the dark. I didn't turn on the lights. Didn't change out of my navy dress. Didn't take off my mother's pearl earrings. I just sat in my rocking chair in the living room, still wearing my wedding outfit, and stared at nothing. The clock on the wall ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a dog barked in the distance. And I sat there feeling something fundamental shift inside me. Not breaking exactly. More like transforming. Like ice forming on a pond, changing the water into something harder, colder, different. You know what's funny? I didn't cry. Not a single tear. Thought I would. I thought I'd sob my heart out, all that hurt pouring out in a flood. But instead there was just this clarity. This cold, clear understanding that settled over me like morning frost. For 32 years I'd been Ethan's mother. That had been my identity, my purpose, the lens through which I saw everything. Every decision I made was filtered through one question. Is this good for Ethan? Should I work an extra shift? Yes, because Ethan needs new shoes. Should I buy myself a nice coat? No, because Ethan wants to join the robotics club and they need money for supplies. Should I date after Curtis died? No, because Ethan needs stability, not some man coming in and out of his life. Should I? Everything was should I followed by for Ethan. And I'd thought, genuinely thought, that all those sacrifices were investments. That I was building a relationship with my son that would grow stronger as he got older. That one day when I was old and gray, Ethan would be there for me the way I'd always been there for him. Not because I needed him to take care of me financially. I've always been independent. But because we'd have a bond. A real relationship built on mutual love and respect. But sitting in that dark living room, still wearing my expensive navy dress and my mother's pearl earrings, I finally admitted the truth I'd been avoiding for months. That relationship didn't exist. Not really. What existed was a mother who would do anything for her son, and a son who had learned to expect that as his natural due. What existed was a woman who had made herself so available, so useful, so unconditionally supportive that her son had never learned to value her presence because it had always been guaranteed. What existed was a dynamic where I gave and gave and gave, and Ethan took and took and took, and somehow we'd both come to believe that was what love looked like. At 3 o'clock in the morning, still sitting in that dark room, I finally stood up. I walked to my bedroom, turned on the light, and looked at myself in the mirror. The navy dress was wrinkled and stained with sweat. My hair had completely fallen. My makeup was smudged into raccoon circles under my eyes. The pearl earrings glinted in the light, the only thing that still looked elegant. And I thought, this is what sacrifice looks like. Not noble or beautiful. It's worn out. I took off the dress and hung it back in my closet. I'd never wear it again, I knew that already. But I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It had cost too much, not just in money but in hope. I removed my mother's pearl earrings, put them carefully back in their box. I washed my face, scrubbing away the smudged makeup, the careful preparation, the effort to look like I belonged. And as I looked at my clean, bare face in that bathroom mirror, 67 years old, gray hair, deep wrinkles, tired eyes, I made a decision. Not a dramatic decision. Not a revenge plan or an angry ultimatum. Just a simple, quiet decision that would change everything. I was done. Done making myself smaller so others could feel bigger. Done apologizing for my existence. Done being grateful for scraps of attention from my own son. Done believing that if I just tried harder, sacrificed more, gave more, I would finally be enough. I was enough. Right now. as I was. And if Ethan and Tasha couldn't see that, couldn't value that, couldn't treat me with basic respect and inclusion, then I would value myself. I would include myself in my own life. I would give myself the respect they weren't giving me. That night, as I finally climbed into bed at nearly 4 a.m., I wasn't sad anymore. I was awake. Really awake for the first time in years. And I knew that the woman who woke up tomorrow morning wouldn't be the same woman who'd put on that navy dress so hopefully just 24 hours earlier. Tomorrow, Grace Pyral was going to start living for Grace Pyral. And nobody, not my son, not his wife, not anyone, was going to make me feel small in my own life ever again. Sunday morning, I woke up at my usual time, 6:30. Some habits are too deep to break even after the worst night of your life. I made coffee. Not the cheap stuff I usually bought, but the good coffee from the fancy shop on the corner that I'd been denying myself for months. That's why. So I could save an extra $2 to give to Ethan when he mentioned he needed something? That ended today. I sat on my small porch with my good coffee, watching the Sunday morning sun paint my neighborhood in gold, and I did something I hadn't done in years. I thought about what I wanted. Not what Ethan needed. Not what would be convenient for the family. Just what Grace wanted. The answer surprised me. I didn't know. I'd spent so long being Ethan's mother that I'd forgotten how to be just Grace. Who was Grace Pyral when she wasn't defined by her maternal role? What did she like? What made her happy? What dreams had she put aside because they weren't practical or because someone else needed her? I sat there for 2 hours with my coffee, and for the first time in decades, I let my mind wander without purpose. Without a to-do list. Without mentally preparing for Ethan's needs. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. Around 9 o'clock, my neighbor Dalia came out onto her porch. She took one look at me and said, "Grace Pyral, you look different." Different how? I asked. I don't know. Quieter. Or maybe stiller? Like you're not waiting for something anymore. Her observation was more perceptive than she knew. I wasn't waiting anymore. I'd spent years waiting for Ethan to call, to visit, to need me. Organizing my whole life around his schedule, his availability, his convenience. No more. How was the wedding? Dalia asked, settling into her own porch chair. I could have lied. Could have said it was beautiful, perfect, everything a mother dreams of. Instead, I told her the truth. All of it. The late arrival. The overheard conversation. The dismissed gift. The forgotten dance. Dalia listened without interrupting, her face growing sadder with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Grace," she finally said, "I've seen this happen before. Kids get educated, get good jobs, marry up, and little by little they forget where they came from. They're not bad people. They're just ashamed. Ashamed of being working class. Ashamed of their humble beginnings." "But Ethan's never denied where he comes from," I protested weakly. "Not when he's alone with you, no." "But honey, when's the last time Tasha came to this house? When's the last time Ethan invited you to meet his coworkers? When's the last time he included you in his plans without you having to ask?" Her questions forced me to face facts I'd been avoiding. Tasha had visited my house exactly 3 times in 2 years. Always briefly. Always with excuses to leave. Ethan had never invited me to any work events. Not holiday parties. Not celebrations. Nothing. And every family plan I'd been part of, I'd either initiated or he'd called to ask me to babysit or help with something. "What would you do?" I asked Dalia. "If you were me?" She looked at me with kind but firm eyes. "I'd decide what I want for the rest of my life. Do you want to keep being the mother who's always available when they need her but invisible when it's convenient? Or do you want to live for yourself for the first time in 30 years? That afternoon I did something radical. I decided to conduct an experiment. A silent test to see if my absence would be noticed. I stopped calling Ethan. Stopped texting good morning and good night. Stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes to see if he'd reached out. I just stopped. And I waited. Day 1. Nothing. Day 2. Nothing. Day 3 I almost broke. Almost called him just to hear his voice, to reassure myself that I was being dramatic, that everything was fine. But I didn't. Day 4. Still nothing. Day 5. Nothing. Day 6. Nothing. Day 7. Nothing. On day 8 my phone finally rang. Ethan's name lit up the screen. My heart jumped. He'd noticed. He was worried. Hey Mom, quick question. Could you embroider some initials on these new work shirts I bought? I need them by Friday. Not, how are you? Not, I haven't heard from you. Not, is everything okay? Just a request. A favor. Because that's what I was. A convenient resource he could tap when he needed something. Sure, son, I heard myself say. Drop them by whenever. Great. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. I'll bring them tomorrow after work. And he hung up. 8 days. It took him 8 days to contact me, and when he did, it was to ask for something. That night, I sat at my sewing table with Ethan's shirts spread out in front of me, and something crystallized inside me. This dynamic, me giving, him taking, it wasn't going to change unless I changed it. So I began making a plan. Not a revenge plan. Not a dramatic confrontation plan. A liberation plan. Over the next few days, I started to notice patterns I'd been blind to for years. I'd kept my house immaculate for family visits that rarely came. I'd cooked Ethan's favorite foods every time he mentioned he might stop by, even though half the time he didn't show up. I'd saved money for family emergencies, that always seemed to be their emergencies, never mine. I'd organized my entire life around being available. Always ready. Always prepared. Always waiting. Like a convenience store that never closes, I'd made myself so reliably there that my presence had become invisible. Expected. Taken for granted. I started to see how I'd trained Ethan to treat me this way. By always saying yes. By never having plans of my own that couldn't be cancelled. By making my needs smaller than his wants. He'd learned from me that Mom would always be there. Mom would always understand. Mom would always sacrifice. Mom would always wait. And why wouldn't he learn that? I'd spent 32 years teaching him that lesson. But I could teach him a new lesson. Not through words. Lord knows I'd tried talking to him before and it never stuck. But through action. Through quietly reclaiming my life, my time, my energy. 3 weeks after the wedding, I received a call from Tasha. Mother Pyral, she said in that overly sweet voice. My mother wants to get to know you better. We thought we'd have a small family lunch next Saturday. Would you be free? Old Grace would have said yes immediately. Grateful for any inclusion. Any attention. New Grace paused. What time on Saturday? I asked. Around 1 o'clock. Nothing formal, just a nice lunch. I'm sorry, Tasha, but I have plans on Saturday. Silence. The kind of silence that means someone is processing something unexpected. Oh. Well, what about Sunday? I'm busy Sunday too. All day. Yes, all day. More silence. Well, maybe another time then. That would be lovely. Thanks for thinking of me. After I hung up, I sat there for a moment, marveling at how easy it had been. How simple it was to just say no. I did have plans for that weekend. A sewing project I'd been excited about. A book I wanted to finish. A long walk in the park. Time to just sit on my porch and think. Were they more important than lunch with Tasha's family? In the old days, no. Nothing was more important than any crumb of family inclusion. But now, yes. My peace was more important. My time was more important. My life was more important. The following Wednesday, Ethan called. This time there was confusion in his voice. Mom, Tasha said you couldn't make it to lunch this weekend? That's right, son. I have other things planned. Like what? The question hung in the air. Like what could I possibly have that was more important than being available for family? Just personal things, I said calmly. Projects I'm working on. Time for myself. Oh. He was processing. Are you upset about something? Not at all. I'm just organizing my time differently. What does that mean? It means I'm 67 years old, Ethan. I'm learning to prioritize my own life instead of always being available for everyone else's. I could practically hear him blinking on the other end of the line. Okay, he said slowly. I guess that's good? It is good, I confirmed. Very good, actually. After we hung up, I smiled. A real smile. The kind that reaches your eyes. Because I'd just done something I'd never done before. I'd put myself first. Over the next few weeks, I began to see my house differently. Not as a space always ready to receive family, but as my space. My home. Organized for my comfort and pleasure. I cleared out the guest room that I'd kept pristine for whenever Ethan might want to stay over. Something he hadn't done in 4 years. I turned it into a sewing studio. A real one with good lighting and a large work table and shelves for all my supplies. I rearranged the living room furniture to suit my preferences, not arranged for optimal conversation when guests came over. I bought a new rocking chair, a beautiful one that cost more than I'd ever spent on furniture, because I wanted it. Not because it was practical. Not because it was on sale. Because it made me happy. Every small change was a declaration. This is my house. I live here. I matter. And you know what? The world didn't end. Ethan didn't disown me for having my own life. He was confused, yes. A little put out that I wasn't automatically available. But the world kept spinning. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do. Family babysitting requests. Last-minute dinner invitations. Requests for favors that were really just other people's responsibilities. Each no got easier. And with each no, I felt a little lighter. A little freer. Like I was shedding an invisible weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. One Thursday afternoon I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the movies. By myself. In the middle of the day. I bought a ticket for a romantic comedy, got myself a large popcorn and a soda, and sat in that dark theater eating my snacks and laughing at silly jokes and not thinking about anyone's needs but my own. It was glorious. When I came out, blinking in the afternoon sunlight, I felt like a teenager who'd just skipped school. Giddy. Free. I called my sister Maya in Charleston right there from the theater parking lot. Maya, I said, how would you feel about me coming to visit you? Grace. I'd love that. When? How about next month? And I don't know how long I'll stay. Maybe a week. Maybe 2. I'll see how I feel. There was a pause. Maya knew me well enough to know that this open-ended plan was completely unlike the Grace she'd known for the past 30 years. Well, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. My sister is finally learning to live a little. You can stay as long as you want, honey. The guest room is always ready. That night, I booked an open-ended bus ticket to Charleston. The kind you can change without penalty. The kind that says, I'm in charge of my own schedule. I didn't tell Ethan about the trip. Not yet. I'd tell him when it was closer. When it was too late for him to try to schedule something that would require me to cancel my plans. 6 weeks after the wedding, Ethan showed up at my house unannounced on a Sunday afternoon. I was in my new sewing studio working on a tapestry I was making just for myself. No deadline, no recipient, just art for art's sake. I heard his knock and took my time answering. Old Grace would have rushed to the door. New Grace finished her stitch, put down her needle and walked to the door at a normal pace. Hey Mom, Ethan said, and I could see concern in his eyes. Everything okay? You seem different lately. Come in, son. Would you like some tea? We sat in my rearranged living room. Ethan looked around, noticing the changes. You moved the furniture. I did. It's more comfortable this way. And the guest room is now my sewing studio. Come see. I showed him my new space, and for the first time I saw surprise in his face. Real surprise. Like he was seeing something he hadn't expected. Mom, this is really nice. I didn't know you were so serious about your sewing. I've been serious about it for 40 years, I thought. You just never paid attention. But what I said was, I'm discovering a lot of things about myself lately. We sat back down with our tea. Ethan was fidgeting, clearly working up to something. Mom, he finally said, Tasha and I are worried about you. You've been distant lately. Not calling as much. Saying no to family things. Are you mad at us? About the wedding. There was the opening I'd been waiting for. Ethan, I said, do you remember the wedding? Do you remember where I sat? He looked confused. At one of the tables? Do you remember which table? No, I don't. I sat with people I'd never met before. Distant relatives of Tasha's. Not at the family table. Not anywhere near you. He shifted uncomfortably. Well, the seating was complicated. Tasha's mother. Do you remember my gift? The one I brought. Another pause. You brought sheets, right? I brought hand-embroidered sheets. White on white. Took me 2 months to make them. 60 nights of work. I embroidered your initials, both of yours, surrounded by flowers. Every stitch done by hand. He nodded slowly, starting to understand this wasn't going where he thought. Do you know where those sheets are right now, Ethan? In our linen closet? Are they? He looked down at his tea. I don't know. Tasha put them under the gift table, I said quietly. During the reception. Like they were something to hide. To deal with later. Or maybe to throw away when I wasn't looking. Mom, I'm sure she didn't mean. Do you know how I know that, Ethan? Because I saw her do it. I was watching. Waiting to see your faces when you opened my gift. I watched excitement for every other present. Real joy. Real gratitude. And then mine. Thanks, Mother Pyral. And under the table it went. Ethan was silent now. Really silent. I'm not angry about the sheets, I continued. Things are just things. But they represented something, son. They represented me thinking you'd value something I made with my own hands more than expensive store-bought gifts. They represented me believing I still mattered in your life. You do matter. Do I? When's the last time you called me just to talk? Not to ask for something. Not because you needed a favor. Just to talk. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. I don't know. It's been over a year, I said softly. The last time you called just to chat was before you got engaged. Since then, every call has been a request or an obligation. So no, Ethan, I'm not mad. I'm just done. Done organizing my life around yours. Done being available whenever you need me while being forgotten when you don't. Done making myself small so you can feel big. That's not fair. Isn't it? Tell me truthfully, when was the last time you thought about me when you didn't need something? When was the last time you wondered how I was doing, what I was thinking, whether I was happy? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Ethan said very quietly, I don't know. I know you don't, I said gently. And I don't blame you, son. I taught you to take me for granted by always being available. By always saying yes. By never having a life of my own that you had to consider. This isn't your fault. It's mine. And now I'm fixing it. By pushing us away? No. By including myself in my own life. By making choices based on what I want, not just what you need. By being Grace instead of just Ethan's mother. He was quiet for a long time, processing. I had no idea you felt this way, he finally said. That's because I didn't tell you. I was too busy being the perfect, never-complaining mother. Too busy being grateful for whatever scraps of attention you threw my way. Ethan, I love you. I will always love you. You're my son and nothing will ever change that. But I need you to understand something. I'm not just your mother. I'm a person. A whole person with needs and wants and a life that matters just as much as yours does. He nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I didn't realize. I know. But now you do. And what you do with that knowledge. That's up to you. So my dear, that's where I am right now in my story. 6 weeks after my son's wedding, sitting in my rearranged house, preparing to visit my sister on a trip with no set return date, learning to live for myself for the first time in 30 years. Has everything changed? Well, Ethan and I are still finding our way, learning a new dance, figuring out what our relationship looks like when it's based on mutual respect instead of my constant availability. But I've changed. Fundamentally. Profoundly. I know my worth now. Not because anyone told me I was valuable, but because I decided I was. Because I started treating myself like I mattered. And that, my dear friend, makes all the difference. Now I know what you're thinking. You want to know what happens next. Does Ethan really change? Does Tasha ever apologize? Do those beautiful embroidered sheets ever see the light of day? Well, my dear, that's a story for next time. Because transformation isn't a single moment. It's a journey. And mine is just beginning. This was Aunt Vivvy, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for sitting with me today. For listening to this story that's still unfolding. For being here in this moment with me. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you're learning to put yourself first after years of putting others ahead, know that you're not alone. We walk these roads together. After I told my son the truth, that I was done being invisible in my own life, something remarkable happened. I disappeared. Not dramatically. Not angrily. I just stopped being available. And the silence that followed taught my family more than my 30 years of sacrifice ever did. Yesterday I told you about my son's wedding. About overhearing those cruel words behind the bougainvillea tree. About that long dark night when I finally understood that I'd become invisible in the life I'd sacrificed everything to build. Today I'm going to tell you what happened next. How I disappeared. how I transformed, and how sometimes the greatest gift you can give the people you love is teaching them to love you properly. So settle in, my dear. This is the story of how Grace Pyral finally learned to live for Grace Pyral. 2 weeks after my conversation with Ethan, the one where I finally told him the truth about how I'd been feeling, I boarded a bus to Charleston with my open-ended ticket and a suitcase packed for an indefinite stay. I told Ethan I was going. A simple text message, visiting Maya in Charleston for a while. Not sure when I'll be back. Love you. His response came within minutes. A while? What does that mean? When are you coming back? My response, when I feel like it. 3 words that represented a revolution. The bus ride to Charleston took 4 hours, and for the entire journey I felt like I was escaping. Not running away, that sounds cowardly, and this wasn't cowardice. This was liberation. I watched the Georgia landscape roll by, pine trees and small towns, strip malls and churches, the whole familiar South that I'd lived in my entire life but somehow never really seen because I'd always been too busy looking inward, worrying about Ethan, organizing my life around his needs. Now looking out that bus window, I felt like a woman waking up from a very long sleep. My sister Maya met me at the Charleston bus station with a hug that nearly knocked me over. Grace Pyral, she said, holding me at arm's length to look at me, you look different. Different how? Lighter. Like you put down something heavy. She was more right than she knew. Maya's house in Charleston is beautiful. A small historic home with a wraparound porch and a garden full of flowers. She's a widow too, but she'd been widowed later in life after her children were grown, and she'd spent the last decade building a life that was entirely her own. That first night, sitting on her porch with sweet tea and the sound of cicadas filling the warm evening air, I told her everything. The wedding. The overhead conversation. The dismissed gift. The 8-day silence. The confrontation with Ethan. All of it. Maya listened with the patience of someone who knows that some stories need to be told in full before they can be understood. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You know what I think? She finally said. I think you've been living your life like you were on loan to yourself. Like the real you was something you'd get back to someday after Ethan didn't need you anymore. But honey, that day never comes unless you make it come. On loan to myself, I repeated. That's exactly what it feels like. Well, consider this your reclamation project, Maya said with a smile. For the next however long you're here, you're going to remember who Grace is when she's not performing the role of perfect available mother. And that's exactly what I did. My first week in Charleston, I did something revolutionary. Absolutely nothing. I woke up when I woke up, not at 6:30 sharp. I ate when I was hungry, not on a strict schedule designed to leave me available if Ethan called during his lunch break. I sat on Maya's porch for hours, reading books I'd been meaning to read for years, letting my mind wander without purpose or direction. It was glorious. And terrifying. Because when you stop being busy, when you stop filling every moment with productivity and availability, you have to face yourself. And I hadn't really faced myself in 30 years. Who was Grace Pyral? What did she want? What made her happy? I didn't know. So I started experimenting. Maya took me to a sweetgrass basket workshop where local artists wove incredible baskets using techniques passed down through generations. I watched a woman my age, maybe even older, working with such skill and concentration, and something in me stirred. Have you ever tried basket weaving? The woman asked me. No, I admitted. I sew. That's my craft. Same principle, she said with a warm smile. Taking threads and creating something beautiful. Something useful. Something that carries a piece of yourself. She let me try, guiding my hands through the basic weaving pattern. And you know what? I was terrible at it. Absolutely terrible. My basket looked like it had been made by a drunk raccoon. But I laughed. Really laughed. For the first time in months. That afternoon, Maya and I walked through the Charleston Historic District, looking at beautiful old houses and gardens. We stopped at a small cafe for lunch. Not because we had to be somewhere afterward, but because we felt like it. When's the last time you did something just because you felt like it? Maya asked me over our sandwiches. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I don't remember, I finally admitted. Well, we're going to change that, Maya declared. For the rest of your visit, every single day you're going to do one thing just because you want to. Not because it's practical. Not because someone needs you to. Just because it makes you happy. It became our game. Every morning Maya would ask, What's your just because thing today? Some days it was small. Buying an expensive coffee. Taking a long bath in the middle of the afternoon. Sitting in a bookstore for 2 hours without buying anything, just reading. Other days it was bigger. Taking a day trip to Savannah. Going to an art gallery and really looking at paintings instead of rushing through. Buying a bright yellow blouse that I absolutely loved but would have talked myself out of before because women my age shouldn't wear such bright colors. According to whom? According to Tasha's little comments over the years. According to what I thought buckhead people would find appropriate. According to a version of myself that I'd created to fit into their world. But I didn't want to fit into their world anymore. I wanted to fit into mine. Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, my phone was buzzing with increasing frequency. Ethan called every few days. At first, the calls were casual. "Hey mom, just checking in. When are you planning to come back?" "I'm not sure yet, son. I'm really enjoying myself here." Then the calls got more specific. "Mom, Tasha wants to organize a family dinner next weekend. Can you be back by then?" "I don't think so. You all go ahead without me." "But it's a family dinner. The whole point is to have family there." "Then you'll have to have it without this particular family member." "I'm not cutting my visit short." I could hear the confusion in his voice. This wasn't how Mom behaved. Mom always made herself available for family things. Mom always came when called. But that mom was on vacation. Maybe permanently. The calls from Tasha were even more interesting. She started with pleasantries. "Mother Pyral, we miss you. When are you coming home?" Then moved to concern. "Is everything okay? You've been gone for 2 weeks now. Ethan is worried." Then to something that sounded almost like irritation. "We really need you back here. Simone needs someone to watch her kids next Saturday and she specifically asked for you." To which I replied calmly, "Simone is perfectly capable of finding a babysitter. I'm visiting my sister." What they didn't understand, what I was only beginning to understand myself, was that I wasn't being difficult. I wasn't punishing them. I was simply living. For me. On my terms. And after 67 years of living for everyone else, that felt less like selfishness and more like survival. 3 weeks into my Charleston stay, Maya and I had the conversation that changed everything. We were in her garden and I was helping her plant some new roses. Well, I say helping. Mostly I was handing her tools and enjoying the warm sun on my face. "Grace," Maya said suddenly, not looking up from her planting, "do you know why I never remarried after Thomas died?" I thought about it. "You never said you didn't want to. I just assumed you hadn't found the right person." "I found several right people," she said, surprising me. "But I chose not to marry them." "Why?" She sat back on her heels, brushing dirt from her gloves. "Because I realized something after Thomas died. For 40 years of marriage, I'd been half of a we. A good half. A happy half mostly. But still just a half. And when he died, I suddenly had to figure out who Maya was when she wasn't Thomas's wife or someone's mother or someone's grandmother. And you know what I discovered? I liked being a whole person. Just me. Making decisions based only on what I wanted. Answering to no one. Living at my own pace. But don't you get lonely?" I asked. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But honey, you can be lonely in a marriage or a family too. In fact, sometimes that's the loneliest kind of lonely, being surrounded by people who don't really see you." Her words hit me like a physical thing. "That's exactly how I felt at Ethan's wedding," I said quietly. "Surrounded by family and completely alone." Maya nodded. "That's because they were looking at you but they weren't seeing you. They were seeing Ethan's mother, or the old lady from South Side, or the obligation we have to fulfill. But Grace? The real Grace? She was invisible to them. How do I fix that?" I asked. "You can't fix how other people see you," Maya said gently. "But you can stop making yourself invisible. You can stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. You can stop apologizing for taking up room in your own life." That night I sat in Maya's guest room, which was quickly becoming my room, and I made a list. Not a to-do list. Who am I list. I am Grace Pyral. I am 67 years old. I have been a seamstress for 40 years. I raised a son alone after my husband died. I am good with my hands. I like good coffee. I like bright colors. I like sitting in the sun. I like learning new things. I stopped. Because after that I didn't know. I'd spent so long being what other people needed that I didn't know what I liked anymore. So I added, I want to find out what I like. And that, my dear, became my mission. 4 weeks into my Charleston stay, Ethan called. But this time his voice was different. Strained. Mom, we need to talk. I'm listening, son. You've been gone a month. I know. When are you coming back? I don't know yet. That's not an answer, Mom. You can't just live in Charleston forever. Why not? I asked. Silence. What do you mean, why not? I mean, why can't I live in Charleston if I want to? Maya has plenty of room. The cost of living is about the same. I could find sewing work here easily. So why not? Because your life is here. In Atlanta. Your house. Your work. Your us. Ethan, I said gently, I need you to hear something. My house is just a house. My work can be done anywhere. And as for us, I've been gone a month, and the only times you've called me have been to ask when I'm coming back or to request that I do something for the family. Not once have you called just to see how I'm doing. To ask if I'm happy. To tell me you miss me for reasons that have nothing to do with needing me. He was quiet. I miss you, Mom, he finally said, and his voice cracked a little. Do you? I asked, not unkindly. Or do you miss the idea of me? The mom who's always there, always available, always saying yes. That's not fair. Isn't it? Tell me, Ethan, what have I been doing these past 4 weeks? What have I been learning? What makes me happy right now? Silence. You don't know, do you? And that's not entirely your fault. I never told you. I was too busy being available to share my actual life with you. Mom, he said quietly, I don't know what you want from me. I want you to see me, I said simply. Not as a function. Not as a resource. Not as someone who exists to make your life easier. But as a person. A whole person with dreams and needs and a life that matters just as much as yours. I do see you. Then tell me 3 things about me that have nothing to do with being your mother. Silence stretched between us like a canyon. I don't. Exactly, I said softly. You don't know. And that's what I'm doing here in Charleston, Ethan. I'm learning who I am beyond being your mother. And until I figure that out, I'm not coming back. So this is it? You're just leaving? After everything we've been through? No, son. I'm not leaving. I'm just stop waiting. There's a difference. After we hung up, I cried. Not the desperate, broken crying of that night after the wedding. But cleaner tears. Sadder but also relieved. Like I'd finally said something I'd been holding in for 30 years. Maya found me on the porch, handed me a tissue and sat beside me in silence. It hurts, I said. I know. But it's the right hurt. The healing kind. I know that too. 6 weeks into my Charleston stay, something remarkable happened. I woke up one morning and for the first time in my life I didn't immediately think about Ethan. I didn't check my phone to see if he'd called. I didn't plan my day around being available. I just got up, made coffee, sat on the porch, existed. It was the most peaceful morning I'd had in decades. That week I did something I'd been thinking about since that basket weaving workshop. I enrolled in an advanced embroidery class at the Charleston Art Center. The teacher, a woman named Carmen, same name as my daughter-in-law but a world of difference in personality, looked at my sample work and said something no one had ever said to me before. You have real talent. Not just skill, talent. Have you ever thought about selling your pieces? Not alterations or commissions but your own designs. I almost laughed. I'm 67 years old. I've been sewing other people's designs my whole life. So, Carmen said, Grandma Moses didn't start painting until she was 78. You've got 11 years on her. That conversation planted a seed. Over the next few weeks I started designing. Not alterations. Not repairs. But original pieces. Embroidered art that combined traditional techniques with my own vision. I created a piece inspired by the Charleston Gardens. Intricate flowers in colors that made me happy, not colors that were appropriate. I made a portrait piece of Maya's house. I designed a series based on Gullah sweetgrass patterns, honoring the women who'd inspired me at that workshop. And you know what? They were beautiful. Really beautiful. Carmen suggested I submit a piece to a local art show. A small one, nothing major, but a real exhibition where my work would be displayed alongside other artists. I don't know, I hesitated. I'm just a seamstress. No, Carmen corrected firmly. You're a fiber artist. And it's time you started calling yourself one. A fiber artist. I tried the words on in my mind. They fit better than I expected. I submitted a piece. One of my Charleston garden designs. And it was accepted. The opening reception was on a Friday night, and I stood there in that gallery, looking at my work professionally mounted and lit, with a little placard next to it. Charleston Garden No. 3 by Grace Pyral. People stopped to look at it. Really look at it. Some even asked if it was for sale. I hadn't even thought about selling it. How much? A woman asked. I panicked. What do you charge for 60 hours of work? For a piece of yourself? $300, I heard myself say, picking a number that sounded halfway reasonable. I'll take it, she said immediately. $300. For something I'd made because I wanted to. Because it made me happy. Not because someone needed alterations or repairs. But because I was an artist. That night I called Ethan. Not because I had to. Not because he'd called first. But because I wanted to share my joy with my son. Ethan, I said when he answered, I sold my first piece of art today. What? I told him about the class, the exhibition, the sale. And for the first time in months, I heard genuine interest in his voice. Mom, that's amazing. I didn't even know you were doing that. I'm doing a lot of things you don't know about, I said gently. That's what I've been trying to tell you. There's a whole Grace here that you've never met because she's been buried under Ethan's mother for so long. Tell me about her, he said. And he sounded like he meant it. So I did. I told him about my daily walks through Charleston. About learning to weave sweetgrass baskets, badly but joyfully. About the friends I'd made in my art class. About discovering that I like historical novels and hate reality TV. That I prefer tea to coffee in the afternoon. That I've always wanted to learn to use a computer properly. That I dream about traveling to see textile museums in other countries. Small things. Big things. All the pieces that made up Grace instead of just Mom. And Ethan listened. Really listened. I don't think I ever asked you about these things, he said quietly when I finished. No, I agreed. You didn't. But I never told you either. I was too busy being available to be interesting. 8 weeks after I'd left for Charleston, I finally went back to Atlanta. Not because anyone demanded it. Not because I'd run out of money or overstayed my welcome. But because I'd done what I came to do. I'd found Grace. And now I was ready to bring her home. Maya drove me to the bus station, and this time our goodbye hug was different. More equal. Sister to sister, not rescuer to rescued. You know you can come back whenever you want, she said. I know. And you know you're always welcome in Atlanta. Promise me something, Maya said, holding my hands. Promise me you won't forget who you discovered here. When you go back to your house, your neighborhood, your son, don't let Grace disappear again. I won't, I promised. And I meant it. The bus ride back to Atlanta felt different than the journey to Charleston. I wasn't escaping anymore. I was returning. But I was returning as someone new. When I got home to my little Southside house, everything looked smaller somehow. Not shabby or disappointing. Just smaller. Like I'd grown while I was away and now had to figure out how to fit my new size into my old space. I didn't unpack right away. Instead, I walked through my house, really seeing it. This was my space. My home. And it needed to reflect the woman I was now, not the woman I'd been. Over the next week I made changes. Continued the transformation I'd started before Charleston. I turned my living room into a gallery for my fiber art. I bought a real computer, not a fancy one but good enough, and set up a small office area. I rearranged my sewing studio to accommodate my new art practice. Every change was a declaration. Grace lives here. I called Ethan to let him know I was back. He asked if he could visit that weekend. Of course, I said. But come around 11. I have plans in the morning. I didn't really have plans. But I was practicing having boundaries. When Ethan arrived that Saturday, he stood in my living room looking around with an expression I'd never seen before. Surprise. Curiosity. Maybe even respect? Mom, this place looks completely different. I've been making some changes. I can see that. It's really... How would you know? I asked gently. You didn't know me before. He nodded slowly, accepting the truth of that. We sat down with tea. The good tea I'd bought in Charleston, the kind I actually liked instead of the cheap stuff I'd been drinking for years. Mom, Ethan said, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About not seeing you. About only calling when I needed something. And you were right. I took you for granted. I treated you like you were always going to be there, always going to say yes, always going to put my needs first. And that wasn't fair. I want to do better, he continued. But I don't know how. I don't know how to have a relationship with you that isn't just you taking care of me. Well, I said, maybe we start by having a relationship where we both participate. Where we both show up. Where we both make effort. How do we do that? We start by spending time together where nothing is needed from me. No favors. No requests. Just time. Getting to know each other as adults, not as parent and child. Ethan nodded. I'd like that. And, I added, you need to understand that I have a life now. Plans. Projects. Commitments that have nothing to do with you. Sometimes I'll say no. Sometimes I won't be available. And that's okay. That's healthy. Even if it's important? Ethan, my life is important too. That's the point you keep missing. He was quiet for a moment, processing. You're right, he finally said. You're absolutely right. And I'm sorry it took me this long to understand that. 2 weeks after I returned to Atlanta, Tasha called. Mother Pyral, she said, and I could hear the careful tone in her voice. Ethan and I would like to invite you to dinner. Just the three of us. At our place. This Friday at 7 if you're available. There was that last phrase. If you're available. Acknowledging that I might not be. Progress. I'm available, I said. What can I bring? Just yourself, Tasha said. Then after a pause, actually Ethan told me about your art. Would you mind bringing some photos? I'd really like to see what you've been creating. I almost dropped the phone. I'd be happy to, I said, trying to keep the surprise out of my voice. That Friday I dressed in one of my bright new blouses, the yellow one that I loved, and drove to Ethan and Tasha's condo in Buckhead. When Tasha opened the door, I saw something flash across her face. Not judgment. Not that carefully controlled politeness. But genuine surprise. Mother Pyral, you look radiant. Thank you, Tasha. You look lovely too. Dinner was strange and wonderful and awkward all at once. They'd clearly put thought into it. The table was set beautifully. The food was carefully prepared. Tasha had actually cooked, not ordered takeout. And most importantly, they asked me questions. Real questions. Tell us about Charleston. What was your favorite part of your art class? What made you decide to try selling your work? Not questions about my health or whether I needed anything. Questions about my life, my experiences, my thoughts. At one point, Tasha excused herself and came back carrying something wrapped in tissue paper. I wanted to show you something, she said, and I heard nervousness in her voice. She unwrapped it carefully. It was my embroidered sheets. The ones from the wedding. But they weren't thrown in a closet somewhere. They were on their bed. I could see the wear patterns, the slight fading that comes from regular use and washing. We use them every night, Tasha said quietly. And every night I feel guilty. Because the first time I really looked at them, was about 3 weeks after the wedding. I saw all the work you put into them. Every stitch. And I realized what a treasure they were. And how badly I'd treated that gift. I can't take back how I acted at the wedding, she continued. I can't undo the things I said. But I want you to know that I see now. I see the work. I see the love. And I'm sorry I didn't see it then. I looked at those sheets, white on white, showing their age now, but still beautiful. Still functional. Still carrying my love in every stitch. Thank you for telling me that, I said. And thank you for using them. That's all I ever wanted. For them to be used, not stored away like some precious thing no one dares touch. Ethan cleared his throat. Mom, there's something else. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It was him and Tasha standing in front of my little Southside house. My house. What's this? I asked. We want to do something for you, Ethan said. Remember how you always talked about wanting a better sewing studio? More space. Better lighting. I nodded slowly. We'd like to build you an addition. A real studio. Somewhere you can do your art, teach classes if you want, maybe even sell your pieces. Not because you need us to. But because we want to. Because we should have been investing in your dreams the way you invested in mine. I sat there speechless. You don't have to answer now, Tasha added quickly. We know you're different now. More independent. And we respect that. This isn't about making you dependent on us. It's about saying thank you. For everything. And saying we're sorry. For not seeing you. Let me think about it, I finally said. Because here's the thing, my dear. The old Grace would have said yes immediately. Would have been so grateful for the attention, the gesture, the acknowledgement. But new Grace understood something important. Accepting help doesn't mean going back to being invisible. It means allowing people who love you to show that love in ways that honor who you are now. I would say yes. Eventually. But on my terms. With my input. As a collaborator, not a recipient. Because that's what healthy relationships look like. 3 months after I returned from Charleston, I did something that would have been unthinkable to the old Grace. I started teaching. The Charleston Art Center where I'd taken classes called me. Carmen had told them about my work and they wanted to know if I'd be interested in teaching a weekend workshop. Traditional Southern embroidery techniques. My first instinct was to say no. I'm not a teacher. I'm just a seamstress. But then I stopped myself. Because that voice, I'm just a seamstress, that was old Grace talking. Invisible Grace. The woman who made herself small. New Grace said, I'm a fiber artist with 40 years of experience. Of course I can teach. So I said yes. The workshop was scheduled for 6 sessions over 6 weeks. When I arrived for the first class, I expected maybe 3 or 4 people. Maybe some church ladies looking for a hobby. There were 15 women signed up. Ranging in age from 45 to 73. All of them eager to learn. That first class I was nervous. My hands shook as I demonstrated the first stitch. But then something remarkable happened. I started talking about the history of the techniques. About my mama teaching me to embroider when I was 7 years old. About the patterns that have been passed down through generations of Southern women. About how every stitch carries a story. And they listened. Really listened. One woman, Beatrice, told me she was recently widowed and didn't know what to do with herself. My kids are grown and busy with their own lives. I need something that's mine. Another woman, Gloria, said she'd spent 40 years as a teacher and was now retired. I gave so much to my students and my family. Now I want to learn something for myself. I looked around that classroom at all these women. Women like me, women finding themselves after decades of being other things to other people. And I realized something profound. My story wasn't unique. My transformation wasn't rare. All over the world, women were waking up after years of being invisible. After years of shrinking themselves to fit into other people's lives. After years of believing that their dreams came last. And here we all were in a classroom in Charleston taking up space. Making noise with our needles and thread. Creating beauty for no other reason than because we wanted to. After the first class, Beatrice approached me. Grace, she said. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. How did you do it? How did you decide to start living for yourself? I'm struggling with the same thing. My kids want me to move into a smaller apartment, but I love my house. They say I'm being stubborn. I thought about my answer carefully. Beatrice, I said, here's what I learned. You teach people how to treat you. If you always put yourself last, they'll learn to put you last too. It's not because they're bad people. It's because you've taught them that's where you belong. But how do you change that? After years of it being one way, you start saying no. You start having a life that's yours. You start making choices based on what you want, not what's convenient for others. And yes, it feels selfish at first. Feels wrong. But it's not. It's just unfamiliar. She nodded slowly. And your son? Did he forgive you for putting yourself first? There was nothing to forgive, I said gently. I didn't do anything wrong. I just stopped doing something that was hurting me. And once he understood that, once he really saw what it cost me to always be available, our relationship got better. Not perfect, but better. More real. That conversation happened 6 times over the next 6 weeks. 6 different women, all struggling with versions of the same story. All learning to reclaim themselves. And each time, I felt more certain that my transformation wasn't just about me. It was about all of us. About every woman who'd ever made herself small. About every mother who'd forgotten she was also a person. My dear, it's been a year now since that wedding. Since I stood behind a bougainvillea tree and heard my daughter-in-law celebrate my absence. A year since everything changed. Let me tell you where I am now. I'm still living in my little Southside Atlanta house. But it's different now. The addition Ethan and Tasha built, the art studio, is beautiful. Huge windows, perfect lighting, plenty of space for both my sewing work and my fiber art. I teach 2 workshops a month at the Charleston Art Center. I commute there, staying with Maya, combining work with pleasure. I've sold 17 pieces of original art. Small amounts, nothing that will make me rich, but enough to matter. Enough to prove that people value my work. Ethan and I have dinner together twice a month. Sometimes with Tasha, sometimes just the 2 of us. We talk about real things now. Not just his life but mine too. He asks about my art, my classes, my plans. Last month he asked if I'd teach him to embroider. I want to learn, he said. I want to understand what you do. We spent 3 Sunday afternoons together, me teaching him basic stitches. He was terrible at it, all thumbs and tangled thread, but he kept trying. And the whole time we talked. Really talked. About his work, his marriage, his dreams. And about mine too. 2 weeks ago, Tasha asked if I'd make something for their first anniversary. Not a request or an expectation. A genuine commission. What would you charge, she asked, to create a piece that tells the story of our wedding? Something we could hang in our home. I named a price. A real price, what my work is actually worth. And she didn't blink. That's more than fair, she said. When can you start? I'm working on it now. A large embroidered piece that shows First Metropolitan Baptist Church, bougainvillea flowers. Yes, those bougainvillea flowers. And 2 figures holding hands. It's beautiful work. Some of my best. And here's the thing, I'm making it with love. Real love, not the desperate prove my worth love of before. But the clean, clear love of someone who knows her value and chooses to share it. Simone, Ethan's aunt, who was so cold to me at the wedding? She called last month to apologize. Grace, she said, I've been thinking about how I treated you. How we all treated you. And I'm ashamed. You deserved better. We had coffee together. It was awkward at first but genuine. She told me about her own struggles with feeling invisible in her marriage, in her family. We found common ground. My nieces, Chloe and Skylar, came to visit my studio last week. They wanted to learn embroidery. The real reason, Skylar finally admitted, was that they'd seen my art online and realized their aunt wasn't just mom's poor sister-in-law, but an actual artist. Why didn't you ever tell us you could do this? Chloe asked, looking at my Charleston Garden series. I did, I said gently. You just weren't listening. She had the grace to look ashamed. You're right. We weren't. But we're listening now. And the sheets? Those hand-embroidered sheets that were shoved under a table? Tasha brings them to me once every few months to be mended where they're wearing thin. Each time she handles them like the treasures they are. I tell everyone about these, she said last time. About how my mother-in-law made them by hand. About how every stitch was made with love. People are always amazed. You didn't used to think they were amazing, I observed. I know, she said quietly. I didn't know how to see value in things that didn't come with a price tag from an expensive store. I'm learning. We're all learning. So my dear, that's my story. The story of how I became invisible and then chose to disappear. The story of how I finally learned to live for myself after 67 years of living for everyone else. Has everything been perfect since then? No. Life isn't perfect. Relationships aren't perfect. Some days I slip back into old patterns. Start to make myself small. Begin to apologize for taking up space. But now I catch myself. I remember who I am. I remember Grace. And I remember that the greatest gift I ever gave my family wasn't my constant availability or my endless sacrifice. It was teaching them to love me properly. To see me. To value me. Not as a function but as a person. If you're listening to this and you see yourself in my story, if you've been making yourself invisible, if you've been living on loan to yourself, if you've been waiting for permission to live your own life, I want you to hear this. You don't need permission. You don't need anyone's approval to take up space in your own life. You don't need to earn the right to have dreams, to set boundaries, to say no, to put yourself first sometimes. You already have that right. You were born with it. The question is, will you claim it? Last Sunday, Ethan stopped by unannounced. Old Grace would have dropped everything, made tea, offered food, rearranged her afternoon. New Grace was in her studio working on a new piece. I called out, I'm working right now, son. Can you come back in 2 hours? Sure, Mom, he called back. I'll go grab some groceries and come back. Need anything? Pick up some of that good coffee I like, I said. And some fresh cream. Will do. 2 hours later he came back. We made coffee together in my kitchen. Not me serving him but both of us making it. We sat in my studio while I showed him my new work. He asked intelligent questions. Really saw what I was creating. Before he left, he hugged me and said, I'm proud of you, Mom. For everything you've accomplished this year. For becoming who you really are. Thank you, son, I said. I'm proud of you too. For learning to see me. After he left, I stood in my studio surrounded by my work in my house in my life, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 30 years. Complete. Not because my son approved of me. Not because my family finally valued me. But because I valued myself. And that, my dear, makes all the difference. This was Aunt Vivvy, and I thank you from the depths of my heart for walking this journey with me. For sitting with me through the pain and the transformation. For being here as I learned to reclaim myself. If this story touched you, if you're on your own journey of becoming visible again, know that you're not alone. We walk these roads together, my dear. All of us learning to love ourselves as much as we love others. Before I go, let me leave you with this. You teach people how to treat you. And it's never too late to teach them better. Loving yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. The people who truly love you will love you more when you're fully yourself, not when you're half invisible. And finally, you are enough. Right now. As you are. You always were. Take care of yourself, my dear. Be gentle with your journey. And remember, becoming visible might be the scariest thing you ever do. But being invisible? That's even scarier. See you next time with another story. Another truth. Another reminder that we're all just trying to find our way home to ourselves. Vivvy.